in the center of the pond is what we call Pelican Island. It is home to 2 different species of pelican, great whites and Dalmatians. Dalmatian pelicans have a little bit more gray on their wings. That's the island they call home. It's where they build all their nests each year. And you'll also note a lot of local wildlife and migratory birds right now. We've got a huge flock of geese that have landed out here, hanging out for a little bit. We're also home to a lot of local ducks, waterfowl, bird species. It's their big backyard as much as it is ours, so we're more than happy to share this space with them. Now, all of this space is really thanks to the vision of our founder, Dr. Schroeder, because he wanted an area where antelope, rhinos, giraffes, and yes, even birds interacted with one another. Now that benefits the animals because they get to maintain instincts that come with being in their herd. All the safety in numbers, having a lot of friends. Now there is a herd on the right-hand side that I'm going to point out in just a minute or two, but after I go through this gate because we actually get a better view of them without all of the bushes in our way. So to the right-hand side, not the enclosure closest to us, but the next one over, you look under those pine trees. So you might have to turn a little bit behind you depending on where you are in the tram. There are Grevy's zebra up there. They're at a feed trough. And they might be sharing that with, I think, some Defasa waterbuck. There's some brown animals there as well. Now zebra try and blend in with each other. Those black and white stripes create an optical illusion, hard to tell where one zebra starts and another zebra ends. Confuses those predators. Now most of the time, when people think of Africa and all those animals out there, they think of those wide open plains. Not all the antelope live out there. This species close to us on the left lives in a much more lush, rich environment. These are sable antelope. And because there's plenty of food around, it allows them to be territorial. Which means they're going to work together as a family unit to sort of clear out any other herds of sable that might be in the area they want to feed in or breed in for that year. Now they share that similar environment with the animal to the right-hand side. These are Red River hogs. Now they have an excellent sense of smell. They're going to root around in the dirt for any tasty roots, vegetation that may be hiding out there. Sometimes the keepers bury stuff for them in here. Now that coat color you'll look at and go, it's very sort of red-brown. They live in a very lush green environment. How do they camouflage? Well, they don't when we're looking at them. But they don't see the world like we do. They see the world in shades of gray. So reds up against greens and all of those hues in between blend in. You disappear. So coat color can really be an indication of the type of environment an animal lives in. Deeper, richer tones are going to live in more of a lush green area. Whereas those lighter tans and browns, like we'll find on many of our antelope, are out on the open plains. Also, skirting the line between open plains and a little bit more wooded area is the lovely large gentleman at the feed trough. His name is Eric. He is 6 years old and he is an East African black rhino. Now black rhinos are a little bit smaller than the southern whites that we saw Lulu a little bit earlier. That's because there's more trees and vegetation where he lives. He has to maneuver a little bit better, fit his body into his environment. Now Eric does share this enclosure with one other acquaintance. I'd almost stretch to call him a friend. It took some time to get to friend, but we got there. Our 47-year-old southern white rhino, Chuck, is just beyond this pond where that dirt road starts to go up the hill. Now we got very lucky that Chuck and Eric tolerate each other because a lot of the times it's very hard to house 2 rhinos, let alone 2 rhinos of, well, males of 2 different species in the same enclosure. But it worked out. Close to us, we've got some of our wildebeest, as well as two of our Gemsbok, which are the ones with the really long horns on their head, black and white markings on their face. These species have sort of learned to let Chuck and Eric wander as they will. Don't really want to get in their way. Now, if you compare the horns on the Gemsbok to that of the wildebeest, they're vastly different. That's because they're used for completely different things. The Gemsbok live out in the sub-Saharan desert. It's very harsh, very dry. They will actually use their horns to dig up roots and other vegetation that may be retaining that moisture so they can get a drink of water. Whereas the wildebeest, we have a few more right here. Some of the babies that were born this year are grouped here as well. Their horns curl up on the side, and that's because they migrate in herds of up to 1 million individuals. So when there's 1 million of you and your friends packed out there on the plains, if you had horns like the Gemsbok, you would knock into each other all the time when you're trying to eat. So they curl up on the side, sort of like bumper guards, and help keep the peace. Now, migrating in that large of a herd is also a great defensive strategy, because the chances that a predator singles you out when there's 1 million other options out there is very low. But even large groups like wildebeest are going to take cues from giraffes, because at full height they can be up to 18 feet tall, about the size of a 2-story house. They have excellent eyesight to go along with that height, so they see danger before it gets to you. Now, one of our smaller ones, this is Baridi here in the smaller pen. Now, he's in here because he got sick when he was younger. He had to go take a little trip to go get healthy. But now that he's back in tip-top shape, we have to reintroduce him to the herd. So this is a safe area where the herd can see him, smell him, they can bump noses, interact in a very controlled way. And then hopefully soon he'll be out frolicking with the rest of the giraffe and these other large animals. Close to us, these are Cape buffalo. They're among the top 3 most dangerous animals in Africa. Adults weigh close to 2,000 pounds and they defend their own. They're one of the few species that can ward off lions and other large predators because they work together, chase that threat away. Now, they're actually advertising their aggression with their entire body. Black is a threat color in the animal world. It makes you look bigger and more intimidating than you actually are. So they are a neon sign of I'm big, I'm grumpy, please don't mess with me because I will mess with you. And for the most part, everyone gives the Cape buffalo their space. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit to look at an animal on the right-hand side. Sort of halfway up the slope in the shade. Looks sort of like a donkey. This is a Somali wild ass. They are a critically endangered species. There's only a few hundred left in the world. That's due to conflict in the regions where they live. So what we have here at the park is a breeding population, trying to increase those numbers so that hopefully one day we'll be able to reintroduce them back into their native habitat. Now we're going to leave this large enclosure for just a little bit to head up this hill and check out 2 other enclosures. We can actually see 2 very large animals in one of them right now. If you look a little bit farther out past these 2 buildings where that curve in the dirt road is, there are 2 very large cattle. Their names are Freckles and Velvet. They're wandering away from the feed trough right now. They are Ankoli cattle. Now, those massive horns on their head are not natural. Humans have bred for them to be that large because they are kept as a status symbol in Uganda. So the larger your herd, the longer those horns, the more status you have. Continuing on our way, we have our roan antelope herd. Sort of short, curled back horns to help move trees and shrubs out of their way. At the tops of these hills, we have another species that's taking that orange tone camouflage color to help them conceal themselves in the green grass. 4 of them are here at the feed trough. The rest of their herd is just opposite the valley. These are Ugandan cob. Got a juvenile male here with those really short horns on his head. Only the males have horns in this species because there's plenty of food where they live. The females don't need to compete. So the males have the horns to show off and compete with each other for mates and territory. To the right hand side. It's called forest because most of the animals in here are found in areas where there's a lot more trees. It also houses another bird island. This one is inhabited by pink-backed pelicans, which are a smaller pelican species, as well as 2 dark gray-feathered birds. Those are West African crowned cranes. Now, cranes are insectivores, which means they're looking for any tasty bugs or insects in those grasses. They're sort of like the pest control for the other animals. As we go through this section, I do want to talk about briefly the right-hand side of the tram and explain why it's undeveloped. This is California coastal sage grub. It's an endangered habitat here in the continental U.S. There's only about 10% of this habitat remaining, so what we have here at the park is 800 acres that we will never develop. It will act as a natural reserve for the wonderful wildlife here in Southern California. Now, that preservation of habitat is important not only locally but globally as well. Because habitat loss is the main threat to many of the species you see here today. They're simply running out of room. So we can continue to breed them in captivity, increase those numbers, but we would love to reintroduce them into the wild if we can. That will only be possible if we preserve somewhere for them to go. As the preservation of each individual species. Now let's get back to some of those wonderful species. Left-hand side, sandy, rocky enclosure, left-hand slope, is where our herd of Barbary sheep, also called Oodad, live. They're sort of small, light tan, they blend in very well with that slope. There's several in the shade of that big green tree. You also might notice Dune, a dromedary camel down there. He's underneath the tree. He keeps our sheep company, or they keep him company, either way. Now, you won't find any wild dromedaries out in Africa. That's not because they're critically endangered. They've been domesticated, so they're used as pack animals and transportation.